This is a new thing again. This hasn't happened in a long time. Okay. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
All right. Good morning, Professor. Can you hear me? Yeah, there is a delay on my side, so hopefully it won't screw up the show too bad. Um, nice to see you.
It's great to see you as always.
Oh, cool. There is a delay. Hey, Professor, I do have a big question before we get to a bunch of smaller
All right.
questions. Remind me, are we an authoritarian country now rather than a constitutional republic? What's your big picture?
Boy, is that's supposed to be a quick question? Uh,
Yeah, just give
yeah.
me a quick response.
Yes, we are currently a constitutional republic. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we are not an authoritarian country,
No.
period. Yeah,
No.
that's the right answer. We'll go back to that. Next question. We really can read some into what happened in this. It's not even a midterm election, just like municipal elections and school board, and some states have, and there was a couple states that had gubernatorial elections, but we can read some into the tea leaves. Can't we? Yeah, this was an interesting little election, at least in Colorado.
Yeah. In fact, I'll even go a step further than that. For many years, and granted, I was self-interested in this argument because I was arguing for why I needed to have a job and why people should pay me. But for many years, I argued that in the United States, political history is social history, that polls are polls, that when
Ah,
vote, in other words, that the only measure of, or maybe the best measure of society is voting.
I love that answer. Yeah, because it's just, I mean, I know we say there's fraud and there's little bits of fraud, and could there be systemic instances of fraud? No, because Professor, what we're really talking about is that some parties don't like mail ballots because it allows it to be easy for non-interested voters to just fill in a bubble and they don't care. And so they think that's fraud but it's not
Well,
fraud. It's just,
that many, I mean, this is 30 years, this is how long I remember insults like this, but 30 some years ago, some social historians said that I didn't do social history, and I said, yes, I only do the history of voters and non-voters. I,
I love that. God,
I
that's
don't
really
know. Yeah, the political history of the United States is the social history of the United States.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, well, we may even do a whole
It's
show
not
on that.
true in other countries, and I would always make that argument,
Well,
you
keep
know,
going then. I'm not positive I understand you. Keep going.
Well, I just, when you do when other historians, if you do something like 19th century um, uh, European and diplomatic history, you are engaged in studying elites for the most part, because they are
Okay,
the
that
ones who
makes
are
sense.
conducting diplomatic history in the 19th century in Europe. But in the United States, even if you're studying diplomatic history in the United States in the 19th century, you might be studying why is Grant doing what he's doing in the Caribbean? It's because of a domestic political agenda that he has to advance civil rights in the United States, and that's going to have an implication in how we deal with the Caribbean. So you can't ignore social history in the United States, and I would even argue that in an American context, that because we are a constitutional republic, that political, diplomatic, and military history all are in fact social history, because we don't have a legal hierarchy. We don't have a legal aristocracy.
A caste system or
Yeah,
a military or a family controlled system. Yeah.
yeah.
Um.
So
So,
go ahead.
so that's good. Deep. Thanks for being a history professor on a current event. Talk to me about current events for just a second, though. In Colorado, uh, if you were associated with Trump, if you were strong R, even in a nonpartisan race, people knew that because of the slates of yard signs and the mass mailings and postcards and stuff. They knew whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. And I generally don't like that, by the way, in nonpartisan races. School boards and city council races, I think, should just be about filling potholes and barking dogs and level of police. But partisan helps, but it's just one tick on the complexities of local issues. But in Colorado this year, if you're a Republican, you lost, except in the deepest of Republican areas. Is that true in California?
Uh, Absolutely. I mean, in California, the only big statewide issue was redistricting, and it passed overwhelmingly. So in the 60s. Jake can look this up, but I want to say in my mind, I had it down as around two-thirds of voters voted for partisan redistricting
And
in
that's
favor of
so all
Democrats.
the Democrats wanted that, and the Republicans didn't, or conservatives didn't, and liberals did.
Well, uh, boy, that's a tough one. Because here's why social history is hard. Uh, we can all look at the ballots, and then when it gets to reading into what they mean, well, then we all get to just start disagreeing. Because
Right.
when I spoke to people who were, I mean, overwhelmingly in favor of um, uh, pro-democratic redistricting for what was Prop 50 is what it was. Um, they said, well, we have to do this because the Republicans are doing this in other states, and we need to do it in order to counter the power grab of the Republicans in other states. And of course, on one level, you say, okay, well, it's your vote, and you're entitled to tell me why you're doing this. Yeah, our fact checker, thank you, fact checker. Who knows what I say when he's not around. 64% of voters. So
Which is
I,
a huge landslide,
yeah.
off the charts
Uh,
landslide.
on one hand, the voter is saying, I'm doing this because I need to vote against Trump. I'm doing this as something against Trump. But, but I am also allowed to say, well, what this is also telling me is that we're still in a period of reaction, that not ideas, that this is a vote against Trump, and don't read anything into it other than um, that people are still feeling like they have to vote against whatever is being proposed, because the logic of it is absurd, which is I'm against partisan redistricting. So my solution to this is partisan redistricting.
Yeah.
You're voting for the thing you say you're against.
Right.
It is absurd on its face.
Well, and it does prove to me that authoritarianism doesn't just come with a single person who is a king.
Oh, no. And yeah,
Authoritarianism
most
can
of the
come with a,
all, yeah. The
yeah, a
dictator,
body politic. The mob ruled democracy can say we're going to be authoritarian and limit the power of a minority.
yes. In fact, that is the source of all authoritarianism and dictators. They all start out as popular leaders who are tearing down the system, and then the use of violence magnifies their ability to claim a popular mandate.
So, Professor, on a sub issue on that, I don't think we've ever talked about this. My liberal friends always like to say, we got to protect democracy. I've been to some of these protests, kind of as a reporter, as a columnist reporter, and they, protect democracy. And I'm not against democracy. It's a form of government versus authoritarianism, or it just says something. But my preferred language is a republic, and they just think that's like conservative crap or something. They don't think it means anything. They think it's contrary to democracy. I think it's more specific, that limits mob rule democracy, that describes that there's a system and a process that we have to follow, and that actually protects our rights better than democracy.
Mhm.
Is Can you be more articulate on that? Is that I think I'm right in what I'm
Yeah,
saying, but
but
is there some history to that?
yes, and it's the frustration with all modern politics, and is that um, almost everybody tells themselves a story, uh, and in order to solve, what they would see as solve a problem, and that story has a sort of an A B, a binary choice. And there's one prince, and it's what we think of as logical, or even is something that has an answer. And that's not what the American system of government is or how it's designed to work. The what the American system is and how it's designed to work is that we don't have one value, we have many values. And all of these values need to be protected, all of them. Uh, and when when there is some sort of a conflict, what that conflict has to be, it has to be over the ordering of these values, not not the elimination of some of them that you don't like. And pluralism is just harder to teach than a bumper sticker. You know, there's nothing easier in politics than saying Trump bad, vote yes on Prop 50 to stick it to him, right? That's a message everybody can uh, rally behind because all you need to know is I don't like Trump. What do I do? You know, uh, back when I was involved in politics, I would always say, if it takes more than 3 words to explain our position, we've lost. And it takes more than 3 words to explain political pluralism. Like to say, hey, person who's voting yes on Prop 50, uh, let me ask you a question. Your your political position is that you are against partisan redistricting. Yes. Okay. And your answer is we must engage in partisan redistricting. Explain that to me. And no one can because you can't. The-
Well, yeah, sure you can. You can say we can't have our one arm tied behind our back.
yeah,
Fair is fair, and if somebody's going to use violence, the only way to stop the violence is violence.
yeah, right, exactly.
I mean, there is a way to explain it, and that's the answer back, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. And that we have to do this now. And so we have to break the system and in order to save the
Right.
system. And it's much harder to sit there and say, listen, when Abraham Lincoln was facing this challenge in the Civil War, he said that the Constitution and the joining together of the states was the frame of silver, the display case, and the ideals of the Declaration are the apple of gold. And Abraham Lincoln said that we have to act so that none of these things are blurred, bruised, and broken. And don't you agree that we have to protect the ideals of the American system, but we also have to protect the system itself? And then they would say, oh, okay, I guess okay, so why do you want to tear down the system? We have to act to protect all of these ideals at once, and not sacrifice some of your ideals in order to achieve this, momentary victory or register your disapproval. But you're right that my argument loses every time. It's an argument that will always lose every time. The only way you can win that argument is if people already value protecting the ideals and the institutions.
Well, but I hear what you're saying, but we still have existed for 249 years. We
Yep.
haven't had a king take over again, or a military junta, or some family that's become the dynasty. We
Yep.
have succeeded, haven't we, Professor? I mean,
Yeah, and I would also say we've succeeded. We've had absolutely terrible presidents. We've had horrible senators. We've had horrible congressmen. We've had people who are corrupt and shady, and in every single era. There there is no era of American history that isn't where you can't look back at it and say, wow, that was really bad. There were some really horrible people basing their decisions on terrible assumptions. And and that's what gives us hope for tomorrow, is that is that usually if you think something's really, really bad right now, it's because you don't know how bad it was in the past.
Okay. Um, I think that's all helpful. Do you agree that the Democrats just wiped out everywhere there were Democrats versus Republicans, except in the most Republican area? But this was a really, truly Democratic landslide. That's not just wrong media, whatever, fake
I
media,
mean,
right?
yeah, but don't overinterpret those results either. Like this is a special election, which means that the low propensity voters that Trump brought to the polls weren't voting. So this is this is an election that if it hadn't been, I mean, Donald Trump is a historically unpopular president,
Right.
and no one else in the Republican Party is popular. Uh, so you would expect that a president who was able to win a popular victory with low propensity voters, who is a lame duck, nobody is motivating nobody extra to come to the polls in a an off year election. And in some, I mean, I think his average approval rating is in the low 40s. Jake can probably check that, but I've seen some polls that say that his approval rating is in the 30s. You know, um, so you have a an unpopular president with every figure, every prominent figure in the Republican Party tied to him
Uh-huh.
in an off year, off uh, 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 series of special elections, basically. Like you would expect every Democrat to win, and for it to not even be close.
Okay, interesting perspective. I guess the reason it surprised me was the amount of doors I knocked on for a couple candidates. So every week I was out campaigning door to door, and I just haven't seen it this strong. Where in a municipal election, somebody goes, "Are you for or against Trump?" And if it was just me at the door, is the candidate for or against Trump, or is he a Republican or a Democrat? Or the ones I always laughed at is he? And they're like just the raising of the question, is he? And I'm thinking, what? Gay? Is he? Is he a male? Is he a female? What do you mean? Is he? And then so I'd look at them and they'd go, a Republican? It was really partisan this year. And that bothers me that this national politics percolates all the way down to city stuff. It seems like the uniformity of everything is driving me nuts. Advertising, restaurants, politics. Seems like we should have some local flavor to be American. I don't know.
We probably do. It's probably just hidden. Jake, our fact checker, Jake Peterson, thank you again. Trump's average approval rating currently is 41.8%. So
Yeah,
I think I
that's pretty
said low.
low.
I think I said low 40s, and that's the average. So Trump's approval rating currently underwater on immigration, trade, the economy, and inflation. So
Yikes.
in every issue
Okay,
that's foremost for voters, he has a higher disapproval rating.
Professor, we're going to do a lightning round early,
Okay.
and you're going to give me a quick historical perspective on 8 or 9 different current events that have happened, especially in the last week or 2 or 3. Ready?
Yeah. If I reserve the right to say pass if I don't
Yeah,
know.
of course. You
Yeah.
can do whatever you want. It's your
Yeah.
show. Um, the government shutdown, longest in history. I have a question. It seems like we would be more concerned that Congress, by Article 1 powers, isn't passing budgets. And I don't know why they're not in due process doing their normal committee work where citizens through their trade associations get a lobby
Haven't
and
done it since the Clinton administration, so it's been
oh,
around
nope.
30 years.
Oh, but Professor, I still kind of think of myself as a Republican. We have the House, we have the Senate, we have the presidency. That's the time when you reset and show that you can govern in a
Mhm.
conservative way, is it not? Why are we screwing up so bad? It's not
Because
me.
because the Republicans aren't conservatives and they aren't Republicans.
I,
They're, that's
I
controlled by President Trump and again a series of reactionaries, people who believe that and I don't know why this would be considered a partisan point, but like it's Republicans are acting like Democrats and Democrats are acting like Republicans. We have one party with two different names. Like
Yeah.
they share the same governing philosophy of being reactionaries.
Well, okay, and I agree with that, but this is lightning round, so let's keep moving.
Yeah, so
On the government shutdown, is it an unreasonable request? I'm one that's kind of opposed to the shutdown from in its entirety. I just think the most powerful nation on earth should have some consistency so we can all plan accordingly. And other countries can react to us, that they know we're going to behave in a way that we should behave. And it's in the Constitution. Congress has the power of the purse strings and they shall pass a budget. So I kind of think they should do what they're told to do by the Constitution. Am I wrong? Does it
no,
matter that we just have these CRs decade after decade now?
yes,
Okay. All right. Well, since we're on
you're
lightning
not
round.
wrong, and it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. Well, we have a platform if either one of us want to run for office on that. We here's a pop quiz question that you might get wrong, but Jake's still with us, so he'll fix us if I'm wrong. The penny is no longer in existence. Well, it's in existence, but it's no longer being made as of this week. Is that constitutional?
That's a good question. I don't know. I've studied absolutely nothing about.
Well,
I
I know
would,
the answer.
you know,
Heart's not
I
what.
don't know what the underlying. I would have to look and see what the underlying legislation is for. Uh,
Yeah, there is no
yeah,
underlying
I don't know.
legislation. So I'll just tell you that answer then. The answer is it is constitutional because we're not removing it from legal tender. It's still worth a penny. You can still spend it if somebody will take it. And but
So
only
like a
Congress,
$2 bill.
yeah, yeah, only Congress has the ability to add or subtract coinage.
Okay.
That's the law. In by constitution actually, but the president can say, "Yeah, fine, that's the law. I'm just not printing it anymore."
Yeah.
Okay, all
So
right.
Trump could come out with a $2 bill again.
Yeah, or a Trump coin, right?
I don't know about that, but
I don't know about it
I
either,
would,
but
I have no idea, to be honest.
okay. Well, it seems like we should care about this. But next one, government data lapses. I don't think it's in the Constitution, and there may be statutory law. I don't know. I wish Bart was on it for this kind of question. But we're not reporting jobs numbers for October. That's okay. We don't care, or it's not a core function, or
It's not okay, and it's weird, and the attempt to manipulate the statistics is bad. Um, but I don't. I mean, these are all things that you just. It just is abnormal. I don't know how else to say that, but there are a lot of things that are legal to do, but that doesn't mean it isn't weird,
yeah,
you know?
I love that. I'm going to use that as a quote for you.
Yeah.
But how about historically? I assume governments have fudged numbers all throughout history.
Yeah.
They kind of do what they want to do when they want to do it, and sometimes they're called
Well,
out. Sometimes we don't know.
I do find it absolutely bizarre. I guess there is a deeper point to be made here, is that um I'll make this analogy about news in general and political news in general. Most people get their news from free news content.
Hmm.
And there is a website called Politico that shares political news, and it's, typically pretty good. But there are some people where they have to know what's actually going on. And there's this product called Politico Pro. And the subscription to Politico Pro, you can look this up, Jake, but last time I looked, they don't even tell you how much it costs. And so what you get on the internet are estimates that a subscription to Politico Pro costs like seven to $11,000 or something like that. Because there are and businessmen who actually want their businesses to succeed, they need the actual news. They need the truth because they're making decisions in reality. what does it say about our society that there are major parts of our government where they don't want to know what the truth is, that they don't think it matters, that all that matters is power. And that's why I
Or
struggle
perception
so much.
rather than reality.
Well,
Or
yeah, and these people who run around calling themselves conservatives and Republicans, and they are radical leftists in their belief system. They are post-structuralist, post-modernist. These are Michel Foucault, believing in, like post-truth, the most radical leftist beliefs, and they're running around calling themselves conservatives. They should be, not to drop some intellectual names, but they should be like Frankfurt School Marxist reading Horkheimer and Adorno and arguing, for the takeover of Algeria, using violence. I mean, I it matters and is symbolic when the administration does not want to know what the truth is, because their argument is that the truth doesn't matter.
yeah,
But
cool.
people
I didn't know.
still need it, you
Yeah,
know.
I didn't know you'd be that passionate on it, so I'm glad I brought it up. I think it was unusual and silly, actually, and dangerous, but not
It
in the
just
deep way.
Yeah, it's just something that like has been driving me nuts. And my friends in the business community. I mean, I first had that thought when I was talking last weekend to a group of business people. They're the ones who were like, we need to know what's actually going on because we count on data in order to make decisions, and we have no
Yeah,
idea what's going on.
how much product and service are you're going to buy, and you're planning out. You're trying to figure out whether you're growing, where to spend your money. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like I don't think people understand that trying to be a businessman in California and deal with California's overreach and overregulation is exactly like trying to do business in Trump's world, where you're like, I don't know if I can deal with this supplier because he might slap me with a lawsuit 6 months later and say that what I was doing was illegal, when I'm just trying to get guidance from them on what they will not sue you for. They're not going to give it to you. Like we're not going to tell you what the rules are, either from incompetence or you know
and are you talking government agencies suing, or is the law allow private
Both.
entities to
That
sue?
that it that this might be something we allow someone to sue you over, and it's going to be decided by a board where all of them are political appointees, and they're always going to find against you. You know,
Yeah,
but you're facing that at the state level from Democrats, and you're facing it at the federal level from the Republicans.
yeah,
And
and to your point, they're similar. They're over regulatory, and they're yeah, yeah.
not similar, they are the same.
Oh my gosh. Okay. The next subject: war. I know Congress hasn't declared war for a long time. Why do we not care as citizens? Don't we want, when we send our young men and women into combat, potentially risking their life and limb, and also the actions they do? It's war. They have to do some horrible stuff to change the outcome of the events, why we're actually in war. And we want them to feel like they're doing the moral, righteous cause, right? That they're doing it on behalf of the American citizens, not that they're rogue criminal murderers. We want them to be American soldier warriors on our behalf, and we want them to have the stamp of approval of Congress. Do we not? To me, that's a kind of a simple thing. Why are we not doing that for my entire lifetime or most of my lifetime? Why is it possible we're going to be in a war, even if it's a weird one in our hemisphere? Is it possible we're
Um,
going to war?
well, for one thing, uh, presidents have always had the ability to do small things less than war, um, with the military. And that is old and it's not new. But your second question, I think, is the more
Okay.
important one. That we, when we ask a question like, should we go to war with Venezuela right now? The answer should be, what are you talking about? You know, like what there, but the fact that we even have to entertain this possibility is a demonstration that there's some part of us where we know that like Trump could do anything. You know, he might start a war with Venezuela over nothing in order to just start a war. Like, and make up some reason or invent some reason in his head, or some of the dumbest, lowest character people in the world get in his ear and plant a conspiracy theory. And maybe there's some combination of like rich guy who's trying to get richer and corrupt guy and dumb conspiracy theorist. And that might lead to our president just declaring war on another country for some reason. Like the fact that that isn't a 0% chance, it indicates just how bizarre our president truly is.
Well, and but I guess my point though is in how I'm not sure apathetic is the right thing, or maybe depressed or nonchalant. I don't know what the right word is, but the culture of the American people needs to be stronger.
Well,
Uh,
people will always gravitate towards the story that they get to have an opinion on without knowing anything. So I think we mentioned this before, but you know, everybody gets to have an opinion on what Sydney Sweeney's face meant in a
right.
7 second clip of an interview. Everybody gets to have an opinion about uh, Jeffrey Epstein and the Epstein Files, right? Because everybody knows that pedophilia is wrong. You know, so these are things that you can have an opinion on without knowing anything. Whereas, like, the minute you say the word Venezuela, you're talking about something where the majority of people don't know where Venezuela is. They don't know what it is. They wouldn't be able to tell you the difference between, you know, Venezuela and Chile and Argentina.
Yeah.
So, it's going to register in politics and in culture as apathy. But ignorance isn't necessarily apathy. They would care if we actually went to war.
Yeah. Okay. Agreed. Maybe. Since there's so few war fighters, though, I'm not positive that statement's true. Um, we can do pretty big scale wars and not affect most people.
That's true. Yeah. Especially because the our military is so effective
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty
for man-based.
lethal force. Okay, that's good enough for war for now. But you do agree with the principle, though, minus the weird little skirmish grenada. There's some things that
Well,
it makes
Panama.
sense.
I think
Panama.
Panama is a better example, you know. Like I did like there is, and there's an old book that I used to use in my classes called The Savage Wars of Peace by Max Boot, um, which is a great book for anybody who's interested. It's a great read. It reads almost like a novel. It's got all kinds of really interesting stories in it. But
I like Max Boo. What was the title again, Professor?
it's called The Savage Wars of Peace, and
Of
it,
peace.
it
Okay.
is a history of small wars in the United States. And what you will see is that we've never really, there has never been a period in American history where we weren't engaged in small wars.
And that's okay.
Well, it sort of must be because we're
Why?
because we're a sovereign nation who has to, and we have to have the ability to respond to challenges in ways that are short of uh, a full-scale mobilization of the population.
Well, I get
Because,
piracy and stuff. If somebody's interrupting our trade routes, we want to go just blow up some pirates. I get
yeah,
that.
well,
Uh,
uh, but well, that's what we're talking about.
okay.
Like, yeah, I mean, that's dealing with pirates is something that you have to do, and when pirates have some sort of state sponsor or
Okay.
even principality sponsor, that then we're talking about dealing with other city states or sovereign entities or whatever political entity behind them, and that will never stop. We will
Okay.
always be dealing with stuff like that.
That translates for me, so thank you. Switching gears from external wars, let's switch our eye to internal wars. But Jake's gone, so we don't know. But how many emergencies have there been in the United States in the year 2025?
I have no idea, but everything's an emergency now, right?
Right,
I assume that
right.
I don't know, there are thousands of codes of federal law, so I assume that in every single case, President Trump is using his emergency authority by declaring an emergency to do
Yeah,
something.
it's been a bunch. I think it's actually only 12 or something, executive orders declaring an emergency on this, that, or the other thing, allowing him to use military forces or,
But
et cetera.
if it is only 12, he's using those 12 to do things in vast areas of the executive branch.
That's right. That is correct. That's true. So, do we have any true I don't want to pitch you right against, our chief executive of the United States, but are there emergencies going on in the United States, or are they actually non-emergent? I mean, are they actually the course of business? Of course, things happen, and of course, there's thugs and dangerous people out there, and of course, people do stupid stuff. I mean, are there any emergencies going on right now in America, Professor?
I would assume, the only thing that is a regular emergency are weather related.
Oh,
So,
yeah, sure. There's weather
so,
related. Okay,
so
I
there
get it.
are weather related emergencies, or let's just say natural
Yeah.
disasters. It could be earthquake, tornado, flood, fire, that sort of thing. Um,
Or
but
maybe terrorism. There could be a bombing or a
sure, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Um, and there are countless plots that are probably being foiled as we speak.
Yeah, but those don't quite count. That seems like that would be under the normal,
Yes, that's what I mean. That's
CIA,
why I'm not
NSA,
counting those things
FBI.
as
Yeah. Okay.
emergencies. But no,
Okay. So
all of our problems are long-term and structural.
yeah, which means by definition not an emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Or otherwise we
Well, and
really
this is
live
what's
in a
popping
highly
up in the Supreme Court oral arguments, although they've been kind of dancing around it and deciding not to decide it. But who gets to declare the emergency? And are there areas, there are some areas where it appears that it's either the president is the one who gets to declare the emergency, or there's no um, authority to stop the president from declaring an emergency. And this was one of those small, you want to talk about a weird little moment in history that comes back to haunt me so many times, because people act like this era that we're in right now, it all started with Trump. And then I'll point out Obama, and they're like, no, how dare you? Or and they'll say how great it is, how great things were in the 1990s with the Clinton administration. And my argument has always been that there was this little moment. Uh, I mean, there were things in the Clinton administration that were objectionable, pardon stuff, scandals, non-enforcement of the law, leaning on the Justice Department, all that stuff happened during the Clinton administration. But in addition, there was something that indicated there was something rotten about the future. And that was when Al Gore was caught using his phone to raise money. And he gave this press conference where, because he was running for president in 2000, and he kept saying, as his defense, there is no controlling legal authority.
Hmm.
And the press kept defending that. And I just thought, wow, this is him saying, because what he was saying is, I'm going to use this phrase with big words that a normal person doesn't know what this means. And then the press is going to leap to my defense. And that's exactly what happened. Because what he was saying was what I did was wrong and what I did was illegal, but there is no legal entity that is defined to punish me for this activity. So therefore, get on with your life. You know, like, yes, it's illegal. Yes, it's wrong. Yes, I did it. But there is no controlling legal authority to punish me for this crime. And then the fact that it became a sort of non-issue or non-scandal because of the upcoming 2000 election. And if you want to remember, there's a reason why people lost trust in the media. And it was because of a series because stories like that just never stopped happening from the sort of, you know, 80s throughout the 90s. It took a long time for people to lose trust in the media. Um, so
That's really interesting
anyway,
points.
that's just a little snippet
Yeah,
from
and I'd
the
like you
late
to
90s.
remember it, whether if it's this conversation or a future one, to go back to the difference between constitutional, statutory, and then maybe cultural or norms. I mean, and there, there's,
Yeah.
and there are differences and all that. So I'd like to go back to that.
So I
And
just want to say for like to make this point clear, when Donald Trump is doing a bunch of stuff that is wrong, that is illegal, and his defense is there's no way to stop, there's no legal way to stop me from doing this. It's the same argument that Al Gore was making.
yeah, yeah, I got your connection on that. And to my chagrin, thank you for depressing me today.
Pressing, yeah, yeah.
Okay, switching gears. Professor, you got to talk to us again, but summarize. This is snap round. Um, illegal immigration slash mass deportation slash masked ICE agents and unmarked cars with weird semi-military, semi-civilian clothes stuff. This the whole thing just is leaving me pretty sour. If you force me to take the binary choice, I'm still a law enforcement guy, including ICE, including Border Patrol. I'm a
Yeah.
cop guy. I'm an
I'm
army guy.
not
I
just a
like
law enforcement guy. I'm a Ulysses S. Grant guy. In his inaugural address, he actually said something that I consider foundational to conservatism, which
okay.
is that in his inaugural address, he says that I'm paraphrasing this, but laws, I'm going to enforce all of the laws, whether they meet my approval or not. And I
Yeah,
know of no way to repeal a bad or obnoxious law so effective as its stringent execution. Saying
enforcement.
like
Yeah,
like he said, and he says laws are to govern all alike. And he was making the case that he was going to, and he actually said this in his inaugural, that he was going to do this calmly without sectional pride. I'm sorry, I'm doing this from memory, but and without regard to local prejudice. So he was talking about civil rights laws, you know, that saying that just because this is a law that you don't like, protecting the rights of black people in the American South, I'm going to enforce all federal laws equally everywhere in the United States. And and if you don't like it, you need to change the law.
change the law.
Yeah.
So that's your summary of where we are right now on illegal immigration, mass
No,
deportation,
because
slash
that's
mass.
not because that also implies good faith by the executive.
Mm.
And I don't think we can assume good faith by the executive.
So I don't even know how to articulate this. Uh, so I'm a law and order guy. I'm on the side of the military cops. That's just my gut instinct. If you force me to, you don't even have to force me. That's the camp I naturally align with. But I'm increasingly getting sour for the variety of stuff. I don't want any U.S. citizens detained. And now maybe for 5 minutes you can be detained while you say, "Here's my," you tell them that you're a U.S. citizen and you prove it somehow. I don't know. You show them your driver's license. They look you up on the internet. I don't know. So 5 minute detention doesn't bother me. But I don't want any. I don't want an immigrant slammed to the ground, Professor. I know that sounds like I'm weak or wimpy or something.
It
I
doesn't
just
make you sound weak or wimpy.
I mean,
Yeah.
just arrest the person and treat them cordially. I mean, say thanks for being. You don't have to say thanks for being here, but the answer is subliminally. You should go. Gosh, this person wanted freedom in America, a better life. Gosh, I feel bad for the person. Because we're going to deport them. And so sorry, we're going to deport you. And you put them in the car, and you go through the process, and you deport them. I don't get why we have, and I know it's performative, and we're trying to scare off other people from coming here, and it riles up the base. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we're doing it, I guess, but they're all bad reasons. I don't get it, Professor. Will you? go into further detail. You can answer Sandin's too, but tell us as a country where we should be going. Do we go out and protest, or do we go and just wait for congressional terms, or do we kick Trump out of office next time? I'm against violence. I don't think you should spit at ICE agents. I don't think you should push them. I don't think you should. I don't even like cursing at them. But anyway, tell us what we should be doing as a culture, even if you disagree with me. I don't care. Tell us about this subject from a historical approach. I need to
Well,
know your wisdom on this.
um, I sometimes think about that I wish Jake was here. Maybe Sandon can find this quote from oh no, gosh, my brain is not working. Um, Senator from New York, John Patrick Moynihan, um, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. One of the last things that he wrote before he died was that the central um, conservative truth is that the measure of a civilization is its culture. He said the central liberal truth is that government can improve a culture. But I'm botching that quote too. Um, and he said, one thing I've learned is that you don't get to ignore, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but you don't get to ignore both sides. The letter of the law and the structure of government is not enough. And sometimes I explain it to my students this way. You need to understand the difference between a necessary and a sufficient condition. And I tell them, I want you to envision a car going down the street. Like, just picture a car going down a road. And does that car have an engine? Yeah. Does it probably fueled by either a battery or gasoline? Yeah. Does it have wheels? Yes. Does it have tires? All right. Just picture a car. And I said, all right, now, if I were to point at four wheels and an engine sitting by the side of the road, um, you wouldn't point at that pile of parts and say that's a car. They are necessary, but it's not sufficient. And what Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Sandin got this quote first. The central conservative truth is that it is culture, not politics, that determines the success of a society. The central liberal truth is that politics can change a culture and save it from itself. There's actually a line after that, the quote's longer, where he says, "The thing I have learned in politics is that that combination is what makes America great." But we act like it's one thing or the other when it's both. uh,
Okay.
it's
So you're
and
identifying my angst or my
yeah.
unease.
So here's what I'm saying about the enforcement of the law. We can't just say we have to enforce the law. Like, it requires human beings with common sense saying, "What are we doing here? Does it actually make sense?" That the culture behind law enforcement is maybe the most important determinative factor, in whether or not our society is actually functioning. And there was an old Robin Williams movie called Club Paradise.
Mhm.
So I'm quoting Ulysses S. Grant and Robin Williams in the movie Club Paradise, where uh, he's pointing out that this island nation, he says, yes, they have a constitution, but theirs is written in pencil. You know,
Mhm.
like, a lot of places have constitutions, a lot of places have laws. What actually matters is, do we follow them?
Yeah, that's
Having the stuff written down, that's not enough. It is, we have to have the structure, and we have to believe in it, and we have to have a good culture using common sense, because that's how we actually need to negotiate through our lives every day. And there's another quote I know Jonah Goldberg uses all the time, where he says, like, it's some famous quote where it's like, "For my enemies, the law."
yeah.
What I want for my enemies is I want every law to be enforced against them. and people pointed this out. And again, the sort of sickness of our culture is that you had some people pointing out how weird it was, the prosecution of Joe Biden's son, and how weird some of the prosecutions of Donald Trump were. And the reason there was no precedent to prosecute Joe Biden's son or Trump in New York is because those are things that normally just don't get prosecuted. They were chosen to receive a harsher punishment than they ever should have been. Like,
Well, it's similar to the new spate of mortgage fraud allegations against a variety of people, right? Isn't that kind of a weird prosecution?
yeah. But I would also say, like, there's some part of us where, like, and this is where I'm at least a little bit sympathetic to, and why I think it's important to listen to some of the pro-Trump voices like Victor Davis Hanson, because one of his long-term points about Trump is that Trump is revealing the rot. Like that people have been getting away with this stuff for years. Because I'm smart and I'm powerful, I know that I can break this rule and there's no enforcement mechanism against it, and I'm never going to face um, uh, any prosecution for this. And because I have enough lawyers, and this will never be a big enough deal. There's a I don't have any sympathy for, like, rich, corrupt people who use the system in order to break the rules. So,
Right.
you know,
On the sub light, is Victor Davis Hanson an acquaintance or a friend of yours?
he was my, yeah, both friend, acquaintance, mentor.
Is he
Um,
is he too powerful, and he might be, to be on our show?
I don't know if he's too powerful. He's, too busy, and he's also kind of getting up there in years. So
Well, so
he's,
are we. Well, so am
I
I.
know, but he's a little more selective about where he spends his time.
No, I get that. He's too powerful. Will you ponder that? We could even prepare for the first time out of 130 shows.
Yeah. Well,
Okay. Next, totally switching gears. Healthcare subsidies for the poor and middle class. This is a big deal. I think this will be interesting how we've gotten to where we are. Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare, then the pandemic, and then people become reliant on that, and the healthcare costs in America just continue to skyrocket. There's a whole confluence of different issues, but historically, healthcare has not been a federal government issue in the nation. 249 years of our nation, up to, I don't know, last 7,500 years. I mean, it's become a more and more and more part of our society. Can you give us some historical precedent on how we should be thinking through healthcare subsidies for the poor and middle class?
um,
Just something for to hang our
well,
hand
I
on.
guess I would start, I guess I would say that what we would really need is a law. This is why I wish we had a smart president who was interested in, walking the American people through a complex issue. I would start by, um, I guess I'd start really fundamental by asking ourselves, like, at a fundamental level, the federal government is there to protect your negative liberties, your rights to be left alone. And that generally speaking, the way our system is supposed to work is that our positive liberties are supposed to be enacted by um, the state and local governments. And if that is the case, uh, I guess the next thing I would want is I would want everyone in America to start making distinctions between health insurance and health care. And I would want to really walk the American people through this distinction. Because, when I brush my teeth in the morning, that's healthcare. When I take a shower, that's healthcare, right? Everything that, and as we learn more about nutrition, what I ate for breakfast, stop thinking of and this is a sort of modern thing to think about, like, stop thinking about your food as food and your drugs as drugs. Like, everything you put into your body has a physiological effect on your body, right? So that means that the air that I'm breathing in could be called healthcare. So what I would want is first to get everybody on board with the understanding that we cannot regulate every part of the physical world that a human body comes into contact with, right? And call that healthcare, right? And we also probably just need to have a national conversation where we decide that we can't legislate whether or not people brush their teeth every day, you know. But if there is, but we can also decide that, as a society, we think that having something unexpected that happens to you, whether it's a disease or an accident, um, that should not financially wipe you out in a wealthy society. And if one of these things happens, whether it's a disease or an accident, if it's something that is unexpected, um, that we're just going to set aside money and pay for that because we can. And but then the next conversation that needs to happen is this something that should happen at the state level or at the federal level? You know, because once you start saying we're going to build hospitals or we're going to have clinics, well, states have the power over medical licensing. They're also the ones who hire the inspectors. Like maybe it is actually proper, and maybe what we do is we say, here's how much money we're going to spend, give it to the states, and say every state must have, you know,
A
that
catastrophic or
yeah, like must use this money and in order to, you know, provide for universal health care, or something, or
right.
health insurance or whatever. But
So
but
you're
but
you're
this would be
saying,
part of a long national conversation full of a lot of experts and disagreements and and but we're not having it right now.
yeah, we're not. So the next one is just as complex in some ways, but it's also simple. Um, I don't particularly like how we dumped however many it was, 20 million people or 40 million or whatever off of food stamps or whatever it's called. Gosh, I'm
Now,
forgetting what.
yeah.
SNAP, thank you. Because I think that's real world. There are some people that are not just living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, they literally use that to eat every day. And we're playing politics with that. And I think there was real pain and fear, real pain, not political fake stuff. Now, what's the role of federal government in making sure that poor people aren't starving?
Well, are we assuming that these are poor people who are not mentally ill and not drug addicts, that there's nothing wrong with their brains, that they are just simply people who do not have money? I just want to know what your assumption is. What is the demographic profile of the person who you want to help? Uh, is it an able-bodied poor person? And I would
Um,
just
I
simply,
I think, I'm not sure, so thank you. It's a good thing I'm not running for Congress. I think there's a lot of people making minimum wage in Colorado, whatever that is, 17 bucks an hour or something, that probably get SNAP as well, because that's just not enough to have even a modest apartment, and maybe you can't even afford a car. And I think they get SNAP. I think there's a poverty rate that you get SNAP at that's working able-bodied people. That's my answer. So yes, those people who can't really afford enough food to survive.
um, I guess I don't. I also just don't agree that that with the assumption that that's not enough food to survive if you are an able-bodied person. But I'm willing to set
Making
that
17,
aside.
85 an hour times 40 hours a week. Okay,
Yeah. I mean,
enough for now since we're still
here's
in like,
why. I mean, I just want to say that from the age of
yeah,
18 to 30, I never made more than $12,000 a year.
yeah.
That was the most money that I made. And most years I was averaging between nine and $11,000 a year in income. Adjusted for inflation, that would be between um, 18 and $24,000 a year. And minimum wage at that time, uh, I was making uh, for most of that time, I was making 450 an hour, which adjusted for inflation would be a little over $9 an hour. And because I was able-bodied and smart, I was able to live off of my bi-weekly I would go to Walmart every week or every other week and I would spend $40 on food, and that was enough for me to live off of for a week or two. Um, and I didn't die, and I didn't have any health problems because of how terrible my diet was. However, and but if we decide as a society that what we want to do is just, uh, support people who are working poor, I could get on board with that.
Like
But again,
universal basic income or something.
yeah, but my preference would be to just give them money. If I got to, if what I had to do was, you know, give them something, I would just give them money.
What, you
Uh,
don't want to drug test them? Make sure they're not buying cigarettes and drugs and alcohol?
Not really.
Twinkies?
No, because the expensive part of the program is hiring the people to check on that stuff.
Yeah,
Like, just
interesting
give them a
points.
check. I don't,
Yeah.
and, um, and again,
But
I'd,
many of them will do what we do. They'll buy cigarettes and alcohol and they'll gamble. They'll
so
do what
yeah,
we do.
good. I
They'll go to a
mean,
sporting event, Professor.
but I would just simply say like we would have to just assess the cost and and raise taxes, uh, in order to pay for it and just send the money. But there are so many underlying questions that I have,
Yeah.
and so many inefficiencies in the existing system that I, I don't even know where to begin with it.
Professor, besides our show, are the average candidate for mayor or state legislature or governor or congressperson, are they having this conversation on how to care for poor people and health or food or quality of life or whether, I mean, is this the average campaign stuff?
Well, in my experience in politics, they were, um, when the media wasn't noticing, when we had higher character people in politics. So I
Okay,
remember
I do
having a
concur with
lot
that.
of really productive conversations with politicians about real world issues at the state and local and at the county level. Um, and working to solve problems of people. But I'll never forget there was a prominent local guy who passed away sadly. Um, and we were doing something that was really good, and it was going to result in saving of hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars. And his number one fear is that it would ever become public because it was something that was protecting the environment and saving money, but he knew that because once his name was linked to something that was protecting the environment, that it would create a controversy that then might, put his next election campaign at risk. So he was willing to save taxpayers' money and protect the environment as long as nobody ever found out. Which there's something wrong with that, in and of itself. But it did mean that, many years ago, most of the productive conversations that you would have with people would be behind closed doors about things that government could do to help. Um, but again, as long as the media never found out about it.
Yeah, that's true, and I've been involved in those, not closed doors because that sounds secretive, but private group conversations with elected officials for 40 years. And I've been involved in hundreds of those quality discussions on all sorts of imaginable issues. And maybe I'm not doing that as much. I'll have to look into it.
Well, I want to address something that just came through in the chat too. Sandon pointed out that what was considered a living wage in different places, and he
Yeah,
mentioned New York and Denver and uh, places like that. And I just want to say, because this comes up all the time in California, you don't get to be poor and live in Malibu. Like part of the equation has to be that you don't get to live in the most expensive places in the world. Like there are these, remember at AEI, they always told us about super zips, right? These
yeah.
these certain zip codes. Like, yeah, I you're right. It is not affordable to live in the super zips. Like it just isn't. So um
You're gonna have to drive if you're in
yeah,
a.
you're gonna have to live somewhere else. I remember, and I don't know if this is still true, but I remember meeting some politicians in Colorado who were in like rifle and parachute,
Yep.
and they would always say like we're where the real people live who work in these other
In
places.
Aspen. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you're like, yeah, I mean, you don't get to live on the $1 million highway and make minimum wage. Yes, that is true.
Or you have to have two incomes, or you have to have a bunch of roommates, or you have
Or
to.
you got to
There's also.
move. I mean, and this is the other
Yeah.
thing that that one of the things that sort of always solves this problem, or I shouldn't say solves this problem, but works towards solving this problem, is we just see people get up and move and say like, we can't. You're right. We can't afford to live here.
So they
Like,
have to go to Texas or Oklahoma or somewhere.
well, Oklahoma, not Texas is a lot of Texas is expensive too. But
Yeah,
you know, a
somewhat.
lot of people say, "All right, well, I California or Denver or whatever, like you, I need to take a different job in a different place and with a different house if I want to have this lifestyle here." Like, I mean, then you just don't, you know.
So, Professor, I've seen a variety of charts in the last week. I don't know why they've come into my feed, but their amount of housing unavailability or housing prices versus like education level versus interesting demographics. And I know you like some of that stuff too. It does appear though we're in an odd place in America right now. It is truly a different scene. When we bought our house, my parents bought their house. When we bought our house, 50, 60 years ago and 30 years ago, we actually could afford it. I don't know if a kid can afford it anymore. So maybe all of the Front Range of Colorado has become unaffordable. I mean, you have to live in a pretty dumpy little place, and the dumpy little place is expensive.
Yeah, well, I moved into a dump, you know, when like,
And so did we.
and, but it's never been easy. Let me say this because this is going to be controversial, right?
Okay.
If we take the sort of if we say the modern era, right? Like, I don't know what you want to call it.
My lifetime,
Yeah,
1966 to now.
it's never been easier for regular people to buy a house because of the creation of a 30-year mortgage combined with um, low-ish interest rates, combined with, for first-time buyers, the ability to get an FHA loan, which means you only have to put 3.5% down, I think, something like that. Somebody can fact check me on that. Like the amount that you have to put down if you're a first-time home buyer would mean that like it yes, you might have to take a job you don't like, and you might have to save up 10 or $15,000. Um, but if you're able to save up 10 or $15,000, you can still buy and get into a new home in most places in America outside of wealthy places, wealthier zip
Oh, so
codes.
Professor, I just one of these charts, I'm pretty sure this is it, said the median income for homeowners in Colorado, I think, I don't think it was America, I think it was Colorado, is age 60. It's moved up over the last modern era, my lifetime, from age 30 to 60. It means that, so I'm saying I'm challenging your source. I'm saying that I think it's changed. I think it's
Well, you're confusing a metric with the cause. Social science data, it's all good, but but what it does is it measures the result. It does not tell us what the cause is. If you want to know what the cause is, you should also look at the fact that almost nobody's dating, that almost nobody values having a family, that almost nobody values, and what they also think they're going, the choices they made to go, where to go to college, how to go to college, I'm saying if you go back and you start looking at the individual cases, you will find, oh, this is somebody whose parents said you should go to a more expensive school and you should take out a large student loan. And this is somebody who did not get married at the age of 22 and they don't want to have kids when they're 23 and they didn't want to take a worse job in a less appealing place because what they valued is they would take a lower paying job in a nicer place because that's what their friends back home consider success so that they can post pictures of themselves taking pictures of their plates on Instagram. Like I think
okay.
people are underestimating just how hard life was in the past and the sacrifices. Like, go look at a picture of a house and look at, in this sort of glorious age that everybody looks back at. I don't know, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and look at the houses that people bought, what they had, what was in their closets, what was in
Well,
their
it's the
drawer.
neighborhood that I live in. That
Yeah.
you've stayed at my home twice, I think. It's
How
this
many?
modest. Yeah.
Yeah, like how many, and also how much money they were spending on going out to eat, how
Well,
much money they were spending on things, and you
coffee.
say
Yeah.
like, well, I don't want to give up this X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, yeah, you're paying more for these other things that you value now, and you are not willing to pay for your housing the way that your parents and your grandparents were. It's a
Okay,
choice you're
I think
making.
that's true, at least in my parents' instance. I think that's true. They sacrificed enormously and had very little in order to have that modest little dumpy house. Yep,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay,
But
I have
what we're
one.
seeing is a reflection of cultural values, not the thing that's creating the cultural values.
Okay, lots to ponder there. I've got one more big one, and we're almost out of time. And I know Sandon wants to jump in, and perhaps Tony. But one big one I don't want to skip. Professor, talk to us about tariffs. U.S. Supreme Court this week had, was it, maybe it was last week? I don't know. It was a fast.
Yeah.
I took the whole 3 hours and watched it. It was really interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
to me, it's clear. It's in the Constitution. It looks like a majority of the Supreme Court saying it's clear, but who knows what they'll do. Can you talk to us about our, back to the original question? Are you sure we're not an authoritarian country? I-
Well, I'm sure that Trump is trying to do things that an authoritarian would do. And it's funny. I guess the one thing I haven't heard commentators mention is why it was such a big deal to the founders to make this distinction between regulating trade and a tariff or a tax. Because, I mean, the Trump argument is just a big giant lie. So that there's no, that because a tariff is less severe than a regulation, that a tariff must be a regulation. And I wanted to just be like, and it did come up in the oral argument a little
It
bit,
did.
but and Akhil Amar in his commentary about the mentioned it a little bit, but even he didn't talk about why this was such a big deal. Although he referred back to one of his books and said I go into more detail about this in one of my books. But when we were still a colony, part of our understanding of um, of the powers of the crown
Mhm.
was that as part of the British Empire, the king did have the ability to regulate trade. But what they didn't have the right to do was tax us. So this is one of these things that's absolutely foundational to America's understanding. And some of this, by the way, and I know that it seems like I always bring things back to race, but a lot of this comes back to um, um, uh, issues of slavery. Because one of the things that
I
that
don't remember this connection, so make sure you
oh
fully
I,
explain.
well, one of the things that came up in the debates and this and where Benjamin Franklin went and spoke to the British Parliament, you know, after the Stamp Act and he's trying to explain why Americans are getting so upset, you know, about the Stamp Act and taxation and they're asking about future taxes on tea or whatever and imports and stuff, and he answers all the questions. But he mentions that they didn't have the ability to stop the slave trade, you know, and that in their debates they had to acknowledge um, that slavery was something that the crown got to determine, not them. But what they got to
Mm.
determine is whether they could tax those slaves if they came into their colony. So having control over your own system of taxation is how you can maintain your authority while still saying, okay, you're right, we can't regulate the international slave trade. We concede this to the crown. We don't like slavery. We would like for it to end, but you're right. We're still part of the British Empire. That's a crown authority. So there's a long, rich legal history of making this distinction between this is a regulation, right? And saying that and this actually came up, I think it was Justice Sotomayor made this point,
Yeah.
that like, that there's that, um, yes, you can embargo, you can declare an emergency, you can cut it off it completely, but what you can't do is tax it.
Tax. That's up to the people's house. It's up to the
Yeah.
you can't
And
tax it if Congress does
I'm
it.
frankly, like the more I think about it, the more I think that this should be, you know, it for what I if I would like to see Judge Roberts somehow get this decision to be unanimous.
A 9-0, not a 7-2 or a 6-3, huh?
Yeah. Like start with the premise, whatever premise you need to get those other two people on board to so that this can be a loud and clear.
It would have to be more general rather than specific. In order to get a 7 or 9, 8, 9, it would
Well,
have to be
for whatever reason, I c- every single justice should have a reason
they should.
to vote against this attempt by Trump to
Yeah. To me,
manipulate our tariffs.
it's clear that both of us feel it's just foundational and absurd that we're in this situation. Now, talk to me about uh, the president has said that we are the wealthiest country in the world now because of these tariffs. And if they were taken away, it would be devastating. Our country might disappear because we don't have this
Yeah, which
tariff.
is funny because they also said that these are not revenue raising tariffs. So like I would just be like,
Well, this isn't the same week the
why are
president.
we do we need to even keep talking? Like,
Right,
because you're
right,
saying the reason we can't do this is because they raise so much revenue. But your
right.
argument is they're not revenue raising. Like let's just go
Absurd
home. What do
place.
we this is where I'm just like, what are we doing here? Like,
Right,
why do we you're you're saying your argument rests on saying that these two things that cannot be true at the same time are true. Like,
right,
like let's just go home. Like you lose. Somebody should have just said like you lose. We're not even
right.
we're not even going any further. We your brief says like and the reason we can't do it is because so much money, and then but they're not revenue raising. Like, I don't know, you pick.
So,
Because
Professor, is it conceivable that it will go the other way?
I guess it is conceivable. I mean, the only it's weird because you would have to use a sort of like living constitutional liberalism
Yeah.
would be the only way that you could go the other direction, which is to
Which
say
is the exact opposite of
it's
the whole
so
transport.
disruptive. You'd have to be what they sometimes call a consequentialist. You would have to be so invested in saying that it would be so disruptive that we can't do it. Or I mean, I guess another way they could find in favor of Trump is to say there's no legal mechanism of us enforcing this decision. Um,
No,
I don't know.
I
Like
get where you're coming from, but I
there
don't.
might, and I would just say like the people who are currently on the Supreme Court are, you know, certainly in the top 50 legal minds in America right now. So
Uh,
maybe I assume that there are things that I haven't thought about that will pop out in their decisions or in their opinions, but so I won't pretend to be able to anticipate those things.
one more before a big picture. I'm going to squeeze one more in. I've asked you 3 times, I think, could be 4 times over the last 8 conversations we've had over the last 2 months. Not just Epstein, but scandals in general. Um, but Epstein, I mean, the last week has been a big change. I mean, even if you're trying not to pay attention to Epstein, I mean, don't mean you, I mean, we as citizens, it's just out there, man. There's a lot of stuff going on. At a certain point, eh, people should raise their not eyebrows, but just go, really? Now this isn't just a little bit inappropriate. It's just way over. I mean, it's over the top nuts.
Yeah.
Um, Agreed. I know you don't particularly want to make this and I know presidents throughout history have done all sorts of crappy stuff.
No, no. Well, here's the
This is pretty
difference.
bad.
I don't know if anybody will ever put it together, but in this last tranche of emails, it does seem to be clear that at least Jeffrey Epstein himself was hinting that it would be that Donald Trump had been on the island and had been in the planes and knew what was going on.
Well,
And
and been with the girls, I think. I mean, there's
I don't know that I would just say I haven't seen anything that goes quite that far.
okay.
I would say the only thing I have seen is that he had interacted with some of the girls, but
Yeah,
I haven't seen anything that said that he did
yeah.
anything with any of the girls. And um and if that narrative manages to stick, it will it's so funny to think about this because now it is probably time to talk about this. That does seem to be true that again, but it's that there's no evidence of any legal wrongdoing.
Do you think Massey, Congressman Massey, would actually come out and say what he said this week if there wasn't some evidence that you and I are missing? I mean, he came out.
I don't think there's evidence of illegality. I
Oh,
think
he
there's
came out
evidence of
and said the president is engaged in horrible crime. I mean, he said it. I don't want to say it because I don't want to be sued. But I mean, Massey
I,
did.
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
again, I would just say like I haven't looked at any, I've looked at zero of these emails. It's going to take a long time to process it all.
I have a lot to say about this whenever there's time.
Well, go
Okay.
ahead and finish, Professor. Then Tony, you can jump in, but we're almost out of time. So,
So this is
I
my, so
understand. I
this is
understand.
my,
As you both know, I used to work with pedophiles, right? For 10 years. There is no question that the man in question is a pedophile. No question at all. That what he did, while he did it in a country where it's legal, if he's a pedophile. and one of the hardest things about pedophiles is there's no treating a pedophile. You can't unpedophile a pedophile. And I think that we need to stop like hedging. And the other concern that we should have is whether or not our current president was involved or not involved, and or Clinton and or whoever else was on the list. All of those people were endorsing pedophilic behavior by endorsing this guy. They knew what he was doing. They knew the nature of what he did, and it doesn't mean he's a horrible person or whatever. It just means that if you're sexually abusing children and getting sexual pleasure out of that, that is not a fixable thing. That's why we lock up pedophiles, and generally they get into general population and kill, and that's been the justice reign, and so as it relates to just that portion of things, I just want to make sure that that we don't mince words around this guy. This guy was not a good guy. This is not the guy you want your kids around or anybody's kids around. And it's no better or worse than when the Catholic priest discovered a pedophile and then moved him to another, instead of like treating him, moved him to another church so that he could sexually abuse other children. It's a patriarchal model that we need to shut down. It's my personal opinion, and I'm talking to you from the road. I'm on the road to in the Plain States. A friend of mine and
got
I
you,
are
Tony.
driving for the next. Go for it.
Got your points. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
History professor, put some context around this. There's no doubt Tony is speaking on behalf of a huge segment of America. Add your historical and political commentary to it, and then we got to cut off. We got to cut the downs.
Well, as in keeping with when something becomes a political issue, what I would say is that now there is a single sentence that is backed up with documentary evidence that is understandable. And I think that sentence is Epstein believed Trump was aware.
Ah.
And I think that's already in the record that Epstein believed that Trump was aware. And
Yeah.
that is understandable by a regular, normal person. Like there, going further than that involves speculation, people who are dead, people who aren't talking, things like that. But at least as of right, and so here is the long-term political implication. If Trump loses the support of his base, because if this fact penetrates that Epstein believed that Trump was aware,
No.
then
And it sounds like Boebert is in that camp too, right? Isn't Boebert in that camp too?
What's that?
Isn't Boebert in that camp too? Doesn't she also believe?
Yeah. And these are people who believe that when they released all the documents, they were going to find a bunch of Democrats. And I guess I did hear somebody say they did, because remember Trump was a Democrat at this time. He was moving around in the big time Democratic donor circles. So Republicans believed that what they were going to find is a bunch of things that were implicating all the Democrats, and they did. There are a lot of other big time, it doesn't make Larry Summers or any of these writers or journalists or friends look good, and they were all part of these like big time Democratic donor circles. And people are sort of like, well, what's Trump doing? Well, remember that at the time he was part of those Democratic he wasn't a Republican then. So so of course, I mean, you take Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert or whatever.
Right.
They're not the smartest people in the world, and they thought they were going to be exposing all these Democrats, but they've kind of forgot that Trump was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, Professor,
here's why I just want to get to one final point of how this could play out. And again, pure speculation, but I want to get it out there. If he loses the support of his core, there's nothing, and the next midterm elections go a different way. There's nothing protecting him from impeachment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Not
you're
just
right.
impeachment, but impeachment and removal from office.
And conviction
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
Senate.
Because because the one thing you can say to the Trump base is, why would we want to protect him? And I'm thinking
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of like the calculus that happened when Nixon was forced to resign, which is
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
looked at the alternative and they were like, I don't want to. It wasn't so much the illegality, so much as I don't want to be seen as defending that guy. And look at the
Or that
alternative
act.
going
Or
forward.
that act. You know what I mean? Even less than the guy, it's that act. They
Yeah,
didn't want
yeah.
to. Yeah. So more
But
less the human.
this
Yeah.
is the one thing that could take him down if
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm glad to have you.
I
I'm
haven't
glad
talked
to have
about
you.
it until this point because there was no evidence up
Yeah.
until, I would just say, up until this point.
I'm glad to have your
That's true.
perspective on it. I haven't been pushing you, Professor, but I've been asking you about it. So I'm
Well, I
curious.
wouldn't have said anything about it until today.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
That's good.
So, Professor, big picture now. We're over time, but end with philosophy or theory. I gave you 10 or 15 different subjects, from war to peace to
And I'm
poverty
gonna break
to
this.
violence to all sort tariffs. I've given you all this sorts of stuff. Can you end with some overriding theme that we should be considering to end the show?
Well, just I would say figure out what you believe in and then apply it to the events and the information that you get over the next 18 months. But decide what your values are now. You know, uh, uh, this is something, again, getting back to Lincoln advice, but the we need to understand the points of danger so that we may act. You know, like figure out what you believe first. And the other thing that I did to one of my classes, this is a small thing, but it blew them away, so I'll mention it to you guys. Um, I was trying to demonstrate to them, I do this a lot in class where I was trying to find like a racist website, you know, because they were like, who argues for this? And I was like, well, it's just, Google, like, who's a pro-Southern racist right now. And Google wouldn't give me the answer
Yeah.
because Google knows I'm not a racist. So it kept redirecting me towards non-racist sites. So then I was like, oh, that's right. I have to use a search engine that doesn't track me. So I used DuckDuckGo. And immediately when I put in the same search terms, I was able to find all the racist websites I wanted, Uh, but it's just a good reminder that when you're searching out news sources, um, you might have to actually do some more work beyond just using Google. You have to start and say like, no, I'm going to trust, I don't know, the American Enterprise Institute. I'm going to trust the Manhattan Institute. I'm going to trust the Dispatch. And then I'm going to say, okay, like I'm only going to listen to them on this issue, or I shouldn't say only them, but I mean, I'm only going to listen to
Credible sources. Yeah.
credible sources that can be shamed. And, it's a kind of a shame for me to not include places like the Washington Post and the New York Times here. But I would say, um, because they both have examples of things they haven't acknowledged or apologized for, lies. Uh, but that you and I don't and I don't mean like get sources from across the political spectrum. Don't Diversity on its own. Listening to what dumb people or wrong people say, like that's not going to lead you to the truth. Yeah, you know, you want to figure out what your values are, and then you want to listen to people who value truth in context above all else, and then try and get the rest of that noise out of the picture,
Not,
especially.
it's not, you're saying it's not censorship to not have to listen to racists or the dumb person or the violent person or the mean-spirited person. That's not censorship. It's just common sense
No, I'm not
to
saying the
look for
government
the
should
truth.
censor them. I'm saying you should not listen to them.
Yeah, you should censor them. You should stop wasting your time and
Yeah,
energy.
I'm just being a little overly technical in the
Yeah, I
definition
know.
of censorship that only the government can censor.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's a good point, Professor. I think that's wise for us to consider. All right, we are over time, so I just got to cut it short at that. Professor, thanks for your time. Hope to see you next Friday. There's a chance we may not, but I hope to see you next Friday. You've given some real wisdom in a variety of topics of current events on how to put it all have it all make sense. So thank you.
And go KC, go KC.
Oh, how dare you? Go Niners.
Yeah,
Go
I'm cutting
Raiders
him
Kansas
off.
rock.
Go Kansas City.
I'm trying to block. I'm canceling the show right now.
Yeah,
All
let's
right,
do
Yeah.
it.
Professor, thank you.
All right, have a good one.
See you later.
See ya.
Have a great day.
Great to have you, Sandon, by the way.
Yeah.